Imagine you're scrolling online and you see startup founders celebrating because they just got a bunch of money for their company. It looks awesome. But then you notice there is something they don't talk much about. How much money the founders actually make. It's like there's a secret that no one is talking about, even though everything else is out in the open. Why do startups founders share all about the big money their company gets, but keep it quiet about their own financials? Let's find it together. Let's talk about Alex, who swapped a cozy office gig for the wild ride of launching a startup. He's leaving behind the world of predictable paychecks for a venture where salary is a big question mark. This isn't just about cutting back on fancy coffees or skipping vacations, it's about chasing a dream which is so big that it's scary. Today, we're getting real about what startup founders from VC-backed startups like Alex or myself are making. In this video, I'm going to confront founder salary benchmarks you can find online with salaries from founders that I interviewed, including mine. We'll study founders who became rich to understand how they did it, and we're also going to see how founders survive through these financials up and down. Let's dive into the truth behind founders' salaries. When thinking of founder pay, the first thing that comes to mind is the ramen noodle salary. Essentially, this means that the company can grow because the founders are putting all of their resources into the venture. They pay themselves no salaries or at least the bare minimum, which in this case is enough to cover the cost of ramen noodles. Paul Graham calls this ramen profitability. He said, "A startup can become ramen profitable after 2 months, even though its revenues are only $3,000 a month, because the only employees are a couple of 25-year-old founders who can live on practically nothing." Throughout the journey to become ramen profitable, a low salary or no salary shows that the founders are committed to their startup and are risking it all. Rather than taking a salary, they're using the funds to keep growing and hitting milestones. Entrepreneur and venture capitalist Peter Thiel once said that the best predictor of a startup success is a low CEO pay. He also says that the founders' salaries create a precedent. The CEO's salary sets a cap for everyone else. If it is set at a high level, you end up burning a whole lot more money. It aligns his interest with the equity holders. But beyond that, it goes to whether the mission of the company is to build something new or just collect paychecks. There are few obvious advantages to companies that are ramen profitable. They get better terms when fundraising, they're disciplined enough to keep expenses low, they keep a good morale, and they have a strong ability to focus on the product and services rather than fundraising. But let's take this advice with a bit of distance. Old-fashioned investors may still have this idea that founders should starve themselves and that their funding should be used to grow the company only. Modern investors understand that starved founders cannot focus on the business if they cannot make rent. Even as a pre-seed founder, you shouldn't hesitate to have a healthy conversation around salary with your investors. So what happens if you do need a salary? You can't live on ramen forever, and it's an expensive world out there. Typically, once a seed round is raised, founders are then able to compensate themselves. Let's say you hit the milestones. Yes! Have great metrics, ate a lot of noodles, decided to take the path of being VC-backed, and ultimately raise the pre-seed or seed round. Now you can afford to pay yourself, but should you do it? If so, how much should you pay yourself? How much do other founders pay themselves? Before we move to salaries, I want to touch on what I call the salary addiction trap. The salary addiction trap is when fresh founders work on startups in parallel to short-term rewarding activities and start to compare them. For 1 hour invested in their dream startup, almost nothing happens. It's like pushing a boulder up a hill. But when working on activities with short-term results, like a full-time job or contracting, they can make up to $200 an hour. As they pursue multiple activities in parallel, the progress on the startup idea slows down. As things get harder on one end and easier on the other end, a vicious cycle kicks in, and the boulder becomes bigger and bigger. Eventually, the fresh founders who may be working on a great idea will drop it, while all it needed was more work. This, in a nutshell, is the salary addiction trap. I'm not saying that all startups' ideas are worth pursuing and leaving a job for, but rather that without intense dedication, most successful startups wouldn't exist today. And it is precisely to avoid that trap that most founders pay themselves salaries. Founders' salaries went up in the last couple of years, but founders at Raise aren't supposed to get rich on their annual salary. In a VC-backed company, your company valuation is anticipated. and you have to grow within it. At this stage, most founders don't assume that they made it, nor that they should have the salary of a senior employee in a tech company, let's say. They consider their salaries as a way to keep them financially stable and get some headspace to focus on their company. So how much money is that? In the US, the short answer is around $75K per year, above 100K raised, $150K above 5 million raised. In the EU, it's lower, below 50K euros, below 1 million, and 150K only happens when 50 millions are raised. These numbers came from a bunch of amazing founders who were kind enough to share their salaries, and funny enough, it aligns with my salary, which I recently shared publicly. Founder salaries do not only depend on the company funding and location, they can also depend on the company industry. Healthcare and biotech founders pay themselves 20% higher on average than SaaS founders, for instance. The gender of the founder, sadly, gender inequalities is true also in founder salaries, and women founders pay themselves nearly 25% less than their male counterparts. Or the founder's family situation, having kids or not, also has an influence, typically $10K for each kid that you have. Other factors might include the number of co-founders that are part of the company. So, when you're coming up with your salary, you might be mindful of all these criteria. Hey, real quick, that product you're building, let me show you can 10x the number of people using it. Imagine you can figure out who stays in your product or not, and why, and use that information to improve. In June.so, we have dozens of ready-made analyses to understand why your customers stick around, like what are the features they use or not. All of that out of the box with one line of code. For instance, specify a design API product that helps collect and distribute design tokens. Use June to increase by 20% the amount of sign-up that stick around after 2 weeks in the product. It is simple. They added June, figure out what milestones their most successful users were doing, and then promoted that pattern to others within the product. If you're serious about building a product that people love, then check out June.so. I'm leaving a link in the description. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the video. Take care. Some founders don't give themselves any salaries. This is becoming more common because of the current environment or by choice. This is almost systematically the case for founders when they start. This is what Grant from Tela.tv or Umberto from Rose.com, two VC-backed companies by some prestigious investors, told me. It was also the case for Josh from Referral Rock, a bootstrap company. But when they're later in their journeys, founders who don't pay themselves have to rely on their savings. This works well for multi-time founders who put significant savings on the side and can use that as a lever to dilute less. And this is why you see so many founders that bootstrap their business when it's the second or the third business they start. For those without big savings and experience, it can feel like you're paying double the price. This is what Grant from Tela shared with me. He said that they should have taken a salary earlier. He and his co-founders burned through their savings, plus later they had moments where a bit of extra cash would have made things more comfortable. Both working like crazy and burning your savings is often a path to frustration. The other possibility is to put your expenses on your company's account. Depending on the country and the laws there, it might be more or less possible. Like in the US, you may pay expense part of your apartment dedicated to work if your company is remote. But this is always limited in some instances. Overall, I've seen the no salary path adding more pressure on founders. If you don't have significant savings, and if you raise capital, I would always recommend paying yourself what you need to be comfortable so that you can focus on doing a great job at your startup. If you're worried about paying bills next month, that's not healthy. The warning I receive the most from founders is regretting paying themselves under the market. For instance, Mike from Grain, a founder I love, shared that. I regret paying myself so much under the market for so long. Burning through savings to get the company off the ground only added to my risk of burnout. To define your salary, Rajiv, the CEO of Product Hunt, shared a nice framing with me. He said, pretend you're hiring yourself as an employee. How much would you pay that employee so that they can do the best work and aren't distracted by financial stress? Both are really great advice. Now let's see a very different approach to salaries. Salaries are the biggest cash burn for a startup. This is the most rational reason why it is not advised to founders to compensate themselves heavily at the early stages. The higher salaries the founders take, the fewer available resources there are for growth. But let's be honest, some people made building a startup a lifestyle. They raise millions, they get 4 years plus of runway, they execute for 2, eventually they pivot for the next trend, NFT, AI, you name it, or they shut down the company, return part of the cash they raise, and raise from another investor. I've seen situations where seed stage founders have a total compensation of $200K per year plus, or pay expense for the apartment for $10K plus per month. Some people are just good at raising cash. Straying too far above these salaries can act as a red flag to investors, particularly in the early stage. But in the end, it's a negotiation. So if you want a high salary and your board is comfortable with that, there are all kinds of possibilities. Right, so if founders pay themselves between 50K in the beginning and 150 after 3 or 4 years in, how do they become rich? The first answer is IPOs. You will make bank if and when your company exits, based on how much equity you still have at that point. The median payday at IPO in the US sits at $268 million. The second way is secondaries. If your startup is doing well, it's common for founders to sell a small slice of their equity before an exit. This is what we call secondaries, and it's increasingly common post-Series A. In most situations, secondaries are a useful tool to alleviate financial stress from the founders, especially as IPO now takes 10 years to happen. And investors can be happy about them too. At what condition can the founder exercise secondaries? Brian Halligan, the co-founder of HubSpot, shared his rule of thumb. If the valuation is more than $100 million and the company is doing 8 to 10 million in revenue or more, and the founder sells less than 5% of the holding, then this is probably a good idea. If it makes things less stressful for the founders, that's better for everyone. If the founders is selling more than 5%, that's worrisome. If you think you're building a unicorn, why would you sell more than 5% of your shares at a tenth of the exit price? I wanted to share Brian's advice because I feel it's a good baseline, but I wouldn't do founders a favor saying it's the norm. Not every founders wait for that condition to exit secondaries. I've seen founders exiting $1 million each at a Series A, for instance. If your company is valued at $100 million and you exit 1%, that's $1 million. In most countries, there will be 30 to 50% tax on that, so that's roughly 500 to 700K in the founder's pockets. If a founder's worked 4 years on that, that's a compensation of 125 to 175K per year, which doesn't sound that crazy in the end compared to, let's say, a salary in a top tech company in California. Let's note though that sometimes these amounts get crazy. WeWork's Adam Newman's cashed out 700 million in 2019, and Hopin's founders exited 100 million. Another way for founders to get rich is to sell their businesses or be acquired, meaning selling their companies primarily to recruit their employees. As part of these deals, it is common to negotiate the acquisition in cash and stock options. Cash can be substantial, typically $1 million per person recruited. But some of the best success stories came from negotiating stock options of the buying company. The acquisition of Instagram by Facebook for about $1 billion in cash and stocks made its founders, Kevin Systrom and Mike Krieger, extremely wealthy. Systrom held about a 40% stake and Krieger about 10%. The value of their Facebook stock increased significantly as Facebook stock's price rose over the years. Tony Fadell's Nest was acquired by Google for $3.2 billion. While already lucrative, the deal's value for Fadell and his team also came in the form of Google stocks, which appreciated in value over time. In Europe, the French company Captain Train sold in March 2016 to their British competitor Trainline for $180 million, half in cash, half in shares. It is said that the founders of Captain Train made 4 times more money from the Trainline stocks than from the cash they took when selling their company. Throughout your journey from Ramen, profitability, then raising rounds, you're going to experience a lot of uncertainty. The possibilities upward are endless with IPOs or acquisitions, and the checkpoints are possible with secondaries, but how do you navigate that journey? How do you go through situations that can take a significant toll on you, like having no salary, low salary, or just having a significant salary cut? The key is to realize that uncertainty is part of the startup journey. Ben Horowitz captures this essence by urging founders to embrace the struggle. To navigate uncertainty more comfortably, you can lean into resilience building practices like mindfulness or scenario planning. Both help maintain focus and prepare for various outcomes. You may embrace a learning mindset too, where every setback is viewed as a lesson. This can help to transform uncertainty from a source of stress to a catalyst for your growth. The next piece is to navigate your runway. Think of your startup's runway as the amount of time you can keep things running before you need more cash. It's like a clock ticking down, showing how urgent it is to make your business work or find new money. To get comfy with this, it's all about three things. One is to keep a close eye on your spending and knowing where every dollar goes. The second one is being smart about your money. And the last one that helps is to have a plan B for money, like finding more investors just in case. Being open with your team about how much cash you've got left can help everyone understand the situation and work together to make that money last. It can also reduce the pressure on you too. And of course, the best way to deal with uncertainty is simply to address it. Founders can cut down on uncertainty by really getting to know their customers and the market, making sure the product or services hit the mark. Measuring things is among the best way to reduce uncertainty, and startups can typically use a tool like June.so to understand what their users like about the product and make decisions accordingly. Throughout this roller coaster, emotions will be all around, I guarantee. But you can manage your emotional wealth by creating a support system of like-minded individuals who understand the roller coaster you're going through. A couple of things that work for me: get a coach, to engage in founders group, or journaling or sharing experiences publicly like this exact video. Reducing social pressure is also crucial. This could work by explaining to friends and family the importance of their support during tough times. It's about finding people who will be there during the lows, not just the highs, and who can offer constructive feedback if you're off track. The journey of a founder often involves going back to square one, and that's okay. It's part of the process toward eventual success, and having a strong emotional foundation makes all the difference. At the start, many founders barely pay themselves enough to live on, kind of like living on instant noodles. This is to keep the business running with whatever little money they have. Once they get some investment, they can start paying themselves a bit better, but it's still not crazy money. It's all about keeping the business growing and not splurging on themselves. The real chance to hit the jackpot comes if the company gets sold, goes public, or by selling secondaries. On top of figuring out money stuff, founders also have to deal with tons of ups and downs, making the journey pretty intense. It's not just about the cash, it's about keeping your head straight. So, when you hear about a startup getting a bunch of money, remember, it's not all going straight into the founder's pocket. They're probably still figuring out how to make it all work, just like the rest of us. If you enjoyed this video, please don't hesitate to subscribe to my new channel. I'm doing my best to post a video once a week. Also, a special thank you to all the founders who replied to my research questions and made this video possible. Take care and see ya. Bye.